Hi, today I'm going to talk about some common defects found on the manufacturing line in regarding aluminum electrolytic capacitors. And I came up with this table, some common cause issues that you can find on your production line with electrolytic capacitors. Please forgive me, I'm going to have some trouble holding up this sign here, but I got it listed out to where things at your production line could cause the problems. Let's see if we can get that here. Caused by internal issues, which got right here, and okay. Internal issues with or process related, and so for example, if you're finding say shorts can be caused by impacts, what will happen is the terminal lead will be pulled out from the body of the aluminum capacitor and will damage the foil, and also sometimes you can end up with shorts. Another effect of impact damage is the capacitance will drop and the dissipation factor will be a little bit higher than normal. The next one that you can find is heat stress. When it goes through the reflow oven or due to high temperature on your rework soldering station, what that can do is it could loosen up the winding, and it could cause capacitance will drop and the dissipation factor will increase because also the loss of a little bit of electrolytic fluid. Also, kind of similar, but it's not impacting the holding tape, is the component could be hot coming out of the reflow oven and immediately being placed into the in-circuit tester without sufficient time for it to cool down. And one of the characteristics of the electrolytic capacitor is it has a positive temperature coefficient. So if you have some of the bulkier filter caps, they can hold a lot of, well, they'll have a pretty high thermal mass, and so you may need to give them just a couple of minutes to cool down. Or you could just take your failures and set them aside and then run them through the in-circuit tester at a later time. Another thing is reverse polarity. What will happen is the electrolytic fluid will start to degrade and cause the component to self-heat. The capacitance will go down, and also the leakage current will dramatically increase, and sometimes they'll end up being a short on the production line, and that's sort of the best case to capture them. But sometimes they'll take a while for them to finally degrade to the point where they start shorting out, and that would be in the customer's hands. Okay, some of the external events can be caused by the vendor, and one I've seen or incidents that I can recall is low electrolytic fluid on the capacitor, and so of course that'll cause the capacitor to drop significantly. For example, I had a 22 microfarad cap, and I was only reading 13 microfarads out of it because of low electrolytic fluid. Of course, the weight will be slightly less, and of course the dissipation factor will be also slightly less. And the reason being is what happened is the vendor had a production line issue, and they had to stop their conveyor belt, and the impregnated windings or the foil were sitting on the conveyor belt for several hours, and of course the material is volatile and it evaporates over time. And so that's just one of those things that you need to be aware of. But another common one from the vendor is the winding tension is incorrectly set, and if they wind it up too much, that will also have the same characteristics of impact damage. You'll have the foil will be tearing away from the terminal lead, and that will cause a drop in the capacitance. And what will happen is as the foil is starting to separate from the terminal, it hadn't quite broke all the way, and so when it goes through the functional test from the vendor, it's okay. But when it goes through the reflow oven, that's just enough to push it over the edge, and actually you'll have a big chunk of the capacitance foils would just be separated from the rest of the circuit, and so you would have a precipitous drop in the capacitance. And you can find that by taking the capacitor apart and looking for damage near the stitching from the terminal lead to the foil. Another one that can happen after reflow is the holding tape is not holding the winding sufficiently, and so what will happen is as it goes through reflow, the winding shifts or opens up a little bit, and of course your capacitance will drop. And what you could do is there'll be a witness mark on the tape where you can see the glue. There'll be like a place where here was the tape applied to the outside foil or edge of the foil, and you'll see like a little streak or like a snail trail of glue. And normally for that should be less than 3 millimeters is sort of my rule of thumb. And let's see, and the last one would be aging, and sometimes that'll show up as excessive leakage current when you have devices that have low current standby circuitry. And of course the capacitance can be fine, but the dissipation factor is going to be higher than normal, but it'll still be in spec. But the leakage current, which is derived by taking the capacitance times the rated voltage times 0.1, and whatever that number is, or if it's less than 3 microamps, and you charge the capacitor for 2 minutes, and if it's less than 3 microamps, then it's good to go. If not, then the vendor has not provided sufficient aging for the component. And what they're doing is basically they just take a raw capacitor and apply voltage on it and let it sit for a couple of hours, and then that's it. So sometimes in their processes they may have a process intervention where they needed to set something aside, but it got misrouted and got shipped to outpacking. Okay, I forgot one more issue I've seen a couple of times on the production line is the placement of the holding tape. This is internal to the capacitor, and this would be the anode and cathode foils. Here's the terminal leads, and they'll have this vinyl tape holding the winding together, and sometimes I've seen the holding tape underneath the foil, and what will happen is that'll increase the spacing between the plates, and of course drop the capacitance, and so that is another vendor related issue, and also that will cause the tape to shift when it goes through reflow. Oh, and earlier when I was mentioning about the holding tape loosening, that's where you'll see like a little trail of glue right here. So the tape will kind of move this direction, and then you'll see this like placement of or displacement of glue residue. And if that's more than 3 millimeters, then the vendor has done something, or they got the wrong kind of holding tape or glue applied. So that's it. Thank you.